This week on the Retirement Quick Tips podcast, I'm bringing you segments of an interview I did with Jason Parker. We're talking about 3 numbers you must know to retire with confidence. Jason is a best-selling author. He created the Retirement Calculator, and he's the host of Sound Retirement Radio, which is a very popular podcast, has over 1 million downloads. I've included links to his podcast and other resources that we talk about in the interview in the show notes, so be sure to check those out. And without further ado, here is today's interview segment with Jason Parker. Let's go back to the topic at hand. So you said 3 numbers that people need to retire with confidence. So what would be that first number?
Okay, so I just talked about all the moving parts and how complicated this can be. But one of the things I'm always trying to do is simplify it. How can we make it as easy as possible for people to achieve 3 things: clarity, confidence, and freedom? We've narrowed it down to just 3 numbers, which are: how much do you spend? So you have to have some idea how much money you're spending every month or every year. How much money have you saved? And then how long are you going to live? Those are the 3 numbers. If we can simplify retirement down to just 3 numbers that everybody has to have some idea on, if we can create a plan around those 3 numbers, then that is going to be a great starting point. And really, you're going to be able to make some really intelligent decisions about whether or not you're in a position to be able to retire, and to know that you won't run out of money in retirement if you know those 3 numbers.
Okay, so let's start with the first one: how much you spend. I don't know about you, Jason, probably similar experience. I have some clients who they can tell me exactly what they spend every month down to the penny while they're still working. But then when you transition into retirement, obviously that number will change. And so even if people were good at budgeting while they were working and keeping track of their expenses, sometimes it's hard to figure out how that number is going to change. And then you have people on the other side of the spectrum. And I would say, I don't know, my clients are kind of split 50-50. Like, they have this vague idea of what they spend, but they really don't know. So then when we're trying to estimate their expenses and what their spending is going to look like in retirement, a lot of it is just guesswork. So how do you drill down to that number and get an accurate picture or an idea of what the likely spend rate is going to look like in retirement?
Yeah, so good. And you're right. It's not constant. It's going to change. It's probably going to be higher when you first retire, and then it probably is going to taper down somewhere in the middle of retirement. And then those expenses will probably jump up again towards the end of retirement as you start experiencing more medical issues. But it's the most important number, in my opinion, from a retirement plan: how much you spend. If you don't know that number, it's impossible for an advisor or anybody to be able to answer the question of, have you saved enough? Are you going to be okay? Some of those numbers are a mystery, but some of it is pretty well known. So if you're going into retirement and you have a mortgage, you pay that mortgage every month. You know exactly how much you're paying. And your advisor could look at your statement and help you understand how much is going to taxes and insurance and how much is going to principal and interest. You go to the grocery store, people buy food, they go out dining out, they put gas in their car, they have an electric bill, a water bill, a garbage bill. I mean, some of these expenses are things that people have been paying their entire lives. That is not a mystery. That's going to be pretty constant. We call those essential expenses. And then you've got the discretionary expenses. So those are going to be things you like to spend money on, like maybe you have a Netflix subscription, or maybe you plan on traveling, or you want to spoil the grandkids, or whatever some of those extras are. Those are going to be things that if you had to live without them, you could. And Ashley, this is the reason that I invented the retirement budget calculator, because what I found in our industry was most of the tools that were developed for advisors were based on how much money have you saved, and then using something like the 4% withdrawal rule to try to estimate people's spending. If you're trying to deliver confidence to people, it's really not a great way to plan, because it's all about, there's so many unknowns when it comes to the 4% withdrawal rule. There's so many unknowns about how the market's actually going to perform and how the asset allocation is going to work, and how it just, to me, it created too many uncertainties about, have you really saved enough to be able to retire with confidence? And so the retirement budget calculator, and you can use this portion of the calculator for free. So people that are trying to really understand their spending, we have it broken down by categories, and we have a bunch of template data in there that people can go in and they can see, oh, these are things that I need to be thinking about when it comes to my retirement spending. And like I say, you can develop a spending plan, a budget for free within the retirement budget calculator. Yeah, just understanding that spending number, understanding that you should mark some expenses expenses as essential. That's the money you can't live without. Some expenses as discretionary. That's money that if you had to live without it, you could, but you could, keep the lights on and still have food on the table. And once we know that number, then it's really easy to start to say, okay, have we saved enough? Are we going to be okay? Some of these other micro decisions like the asset allocation, and are you going to overweight value companies? Are you going to overweight small cap? Are you going to overweight profitability? And some of the decisions that people need to make on the investment side of things just get to be a lot easier if you're going to diversify your money across time segments and have buckets. But we really want to keep it simple and say, what's your spending? Once we know how much your spending is, then we can look at your investments and see how much money you've saved, all of your different retirement accounts and cash accounts. And then we need to make a projection for life expectancy, how long we think you're going to live.